Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Aaron Diaz, and you're listening to episode number 13 of Live the Good Life from the podcast studios of Aaron's Wine Chronicles corporate headquarters in the heart of Washington wine country. Today, we're talking about Red Mountain wines, and in particular, those crafted by our next guest. With over a decade of experience, co-owning and operating a family-owned boutique winery located smack in the middle of the Red Mountain AVA, we are going to get acquainted with our guest's take on wine, her approach to winemaking, and the latest news from Red Mountain. In addition, we'll be discussing upcoming tasting room events, and we'll learn lots more about the latest releases from Frichette Winery. Our guest today is a true friend of the Live the Good Life podcast, and hosting her is a real privilege for me. My guest is really a mover and shaker in the Northwest wine industry. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Shae Frichette to the show.
Hello, hello. Such a fabulous audience. Thank you so much. It's amazing to be here.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Shae, for taking time out of your day to come down and join the podcast. Why don't you just give us just a quick introduction for our audience?
Well, I'm a Southern girl, mom, wife, have a lot of really great friends here in the Tri-Cities and beyond, and I make wine.
Yeah, you do. You make fabulous wine. So that's awesome. Thank you again for being here. It's great having you on the show. For the record, so that the audience knows and understands, we aren't exactly complete strangers. I didn't just go off the street and ask you, hey, you want to come on in and do a podcast? I see you and your husband, Greg, on a routine basis. I really enjoy visiting Frichette Winery, the tasting room, whenever I can. And what makes this podcast special for me is that my wife and I have known you and Greg, and of course your number one son, Jaden, for many years, almost from the opening bell of Frichette's first vintage. And, upon that first visit, we became club members, and we haven't looked back since.
Well, we love having you. I mean, really, it's an honor. It's our honor.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. So I want to first start off like I do periodically in explaining to the audience what our tradition is here in the studio. We always enjoy a great libation while we're recording, and this interview is no different. Today's wine is a 2017 Force Majeure Parvada, sourced from Red Mountain and crafted by winemaker Todd Alexander. You can see the bottle. For those of you watching the podcast, the video podcast of this interview, you can see the bottle there. It's a blend, a Rhone-style blend of 5 varietals: Mourvedre, Grenache, Syrah, Cinsault, and Counoise. So, here, cheers to you.
Cheers.
Okay, and thank you for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing this wine. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of get your take on it.
Well, I was telling you, like, when you said Red Mountain, I was thinking that it was going to be just like crazy, big and bold, but I love how elegant this is. Beautiful fruit, great tannin.
Yeah.
Can I take the bottle with me?
You can, absolutely.
Oh, I really can?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, speaking of wines, I was in the tasting room a couple of weeks ago, and I still have a bottle of your first vintage, the 2011 Columbia Valley Red. It's in my cellar. And about 2 weeks ago, I mentioned to Greg, I was sitting there having some wine with Adam, and I mentioned to Greg that I had that, and he's like, oh, wow, you got to drink that. He said it kind of in a serious manner, like, you better drink that. So I'm like, what I'd like to do is like a vertical, because I've got 11. I don't know if you did one in 12. Yeah,
yep,
12,
yep,
13, 14, 15. I've got all the way up to whatever it is right now,
wow.
18 or 19, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, invite me over.
Yeah, I mean, I've got that whole thing. And
that is so cool.
I mean, that would be fun.
Well, it's a beautiful comparison, too, because, I mean, you're talking about 11 that was a cooler vintage, and then 12 that's normal. So to compare vintages is just, I think that's a lot of fun.
Exactly. So, okay, we'll get this started. Shae, let's start from the early days. Tell us about your family, where you grew up, and how all that went down.
Well, I grew up in a little town called Marion in South Carolina, and actually like the very rural parts of that. When I say rural, this is like as a kid, I got to like run around the yard with my shoes off, and my aunts lived next door, my uncle on the other side, and so lots of cousins around. So when we talk about the good life, like that's what I think about in like my early years growing up. Yeah. Cool.
When you were a little girl, when I was a little boy, I wanted to be a podcaster. No, I'm just kidding. I actually wanted to be an astronaut because back when I was like 4 years old, 5 years old, NASA NASA, the Apollo stuff was all going on, and they were allegedly landing on the moon. I don't know if it's true or not anymore. It's stuff you see on social media, there's the flat earthers and all of that. I'm like, whoa, is this really true? But I'm a scientist. So it happened. But anyhow, that's what I wanted to be. I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old. When you were a little girl, what were your dreams? What did you aspire to be?
When I was little, I really didn't have a occupation in mind. I really grew up just kind of living in the moment, like really just living life. I even started college as undecided. And then as I started to go through college, there were so many things that I wanted to do. Like once I got exposure to all the things that you could do, and I still think that I'm living in that way now. There's so many things that I want to do. So I'm still that little girl that's just like living in the moment, but also just excited about all kinds of possibility of just having my hands in different pots and doing different things.
Yeah, I think we're kind of similar in nature that way. I mean, I'm an old man, but I still like doing things that challenge me that are new. Like, we're sitting here doing this podcast. You're sitting in my studio. I would say 5 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have never ventured that I would be doing this as a side job. But and it's not really a job; it's just a passion of mine. But yeah, I hear you. That's really cool. So let's fast forward through, get to high school and into your college years. Can you take us through how you eventually ended up in Southern Cal?
Well, I had to select a major, so I majored in theater and speech communications. And my theater department, at the end of the semester, everyone was asking, like, what are you going to do? And for some reason, I said, I'm going to go to L.A. I graduated in December, and as an actress, you go to New York or L.A. And I don't really like cold, like crazy winters. So New York was out for me. So once I said to one person I was going to LA, that just kind of spread throughout the whole department. And the head of my department was like, oh my gosh, you're going to LA. Best of luck to you. And I had to go then.
How old were you at this time?
I wasn't even 21.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? So
Did you know anybody in Southern Cal?
I didn't know one person.
You didn't know a soul?
Nope. I'll tell you, here's what's well, I think at that age too, like, you're so courageous and you don't know what you don't know. And so I hooked up a car to a U-Haul truck.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Packed all your stuff and drove the U-Haul yourself?
No, I had a friend drive with me.
Good.
So I was talking to a friend. And I was just like,
Yeah.
this is a straight shot, like going through Tennessee. And my friend was just like, you can't do that. Like, you're going to pull a car through the mountains and it's like cold, like during the winter. So I had a friend that came over with me, just drove over and then flew back.
Man, that sounds like an experience. And risky. I mean.
You don't know what you don't know.
No, you don't. Okay. So you're now in Southern California. So at some point, and let's think Game of Thrones here, okay? At some point, you end up meeting this knight in shining armor. Don't you laugh. Knight in shining armor, Sir Gregorius of House Frichette, right? So please walk us through this phase of your life and tell us the true story about the coin flip because, do this for the audience because this is one of the greatest life-changing type stories and events that I've encountered with people in my circle. I consider you and Greg part of my circle. And I want to get your version because I've heard Greg tell it to me, to my brothers, to people around us multiple times. And there might be a point of contention that I'll bring up once you tell me your side of the story.
Okay, so we really were living the life in Southern California. At this point, we were in Aliso Viejo, which is a little town not too far from Laguna Beach. And Greg just says, you know what, life is good. Let's have a baby and move closer to our parents. So I assumed that meant we were going to move closer to my parents in South Carolina. And Greg was assuming we moved closer to his parents in Tri-Cities, Washington. So obviously, I was not on the same page as my knight in shining armor. So after going back and forth, Greg just says, you know what, I'm sick of arguing. Let's leave it to fate. Let's flip a coin.
Okay.
If it lands on heads, we move to Washington. If it lands on tails, we go to South Carolina. And I was like 2 glasses of wine in, so I thought it was a great idea. So we sit down, he flips the quarter, and that sucker lands on heads for Washington. So I say best out of 5.
Okay, so you're actually telling the truth.
Yes.
Because Greg also says, and then right after she lost the coin flip, the first thing she does is 2 out of 3 or 4 out of 5 or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, that's bad. That's really bad. That just tells you that she really doesn't want to go to the Tri-Cities. She wants to go back home.
Well, at this point, I was just like, come on, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's have another shot. But, he
But
said...
he refused, right? I mean, you guys...
Well, he was just like, oh, well, I mean, what really got to my heart, he was like, oh, we can't tempt fate. And that just kind of made me trimmer. So then I thought, Greg's kind of a jokester, in our relationship, dating and being married. He just kind of likes to, he's just a jokester. He likes to trick us and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I was like, okay, let me check and see if this is a two-headed coin.
Right.
And it wasn't. So that's what brought us here.
Okay. So you're back in Southeast Washington now, and you're living in, is it in Kennewick or you're out? Where did you first move to? Benton City is where you moved directly to.
That is where I moved directly to.
Okay, so how did you actually get started in an industry that you knew zero about, right? I mean, really, you had never made wine before, had you?
No, I hadn't.
Greg had never made wine before.
Nope.
I know that, I think Greg came from like a farming background, a little bit of a farming background, right?
Correct. So his family farmed wheat in Colfax in the Palouse.
The last wheat-based wine I tasted wasn't so good, so I
don't think I want to try it. That's a no for me.
So how did you get actually started in that taking that wine track?
So when we flipped that coin, it really was just that we were moving to Washington, and then I just said, if we're going to move, let's do something that gives us goosebumps. And we both really enjoyed agriculture. We really enjoyed wine, so we thought, let's grow wine grapes and learn how to make wine. And so that's kind of where that went. I was working in corporate training, and Greg was in IT. And we made a decision to leave those careers. We had great careers, had fun doing it. But we decided to leave that and chase something that we thought would give us goosebumps and get to create something together. And we fell in love with Red Mountain. When Greg was growing up in the Tri-Cities, Red Mountain was not an AVA.
Yeah.
And, so you just didn't know. And we got the opportunity to discover it for ourselves and decided that this is where we want to be. We want to live here. We want to work here. We want to make wine from Red Mountain AVA wine grapes. The challenge is there was nothing for sale. So Greg and I just went knocking on doors, begging people to sell to us. Every door on Red Mountain we knocked on. And what
did you dress in like shabby clothes and kind of push a cart and stuff?
We probably should have.
Yeah.
We probably would have had better luck.
Pull on their heartstrings, I mean, well, whatever you did, it worked, right?
Well, the place we purchased, they said no 4 times before saying yes. So
and there were no firearms involved in this or anything?
Well, not from us. I'm glad it worked. Well, they did have some goat heads around, so maybe that was their version of firearms. So it was a perfect place for us.
That's kind of really cool story. As I'm hearing you recount this whole thing, to me, it's hard to imagine. I'm very risk averse. I like stability. I like having the odds with me, knowing that the odds are for me, not jumping off a cliff and just hoping I land on my feet, right? So the stress involved and all of I imagine as you were going through this process, you had questions, you started doubting, hey, did we make the right decision? I'm sure that went through your minds at times, as you're doing this. At what point in the process did you finally realize, what, we made it? And not only did we make it, but we're going to take this thing and launch it, and it's going to really be successful.
Well, I tell you, you asked a question about like being nervous or wondering if we did the right thing. I have to share this story of just driving on the I-82 in like the craziest of summers. I mean, we had like one of these over 100-degree days. And when we moved here, in order to make this business work, I had to sell my car. And we literally had like nothing. We put everything we had into this business. And my father-in-law gave us this old red Trailblazer, and it had no radio and it had no air conditioning in it. And in this over 100-degree weather, I'm driving down I-82 and I have Jaden with me, and he is like 8 months old. So he's in the back and it's so hot. You
got the windows down.
Got the windows down, and he's crying. And to me, that was just kind of like the pit of failure. I mean, I just felt like I fell. And I remember thinking, if this car breaks down, my only hope is that it breaks down under an overpass so we have some shade. Because I'd have to wait. My husband couldn't even come pick me up because we didn't have another car. And so that was the point where I probably was at like the bottom with this business. you're just starting out and you just
Yeah.
don't really know how it's going to work, and you have a business plan, and
That's all that risk I was talking about.
and so it's, and so I just like I cried and cried and cried, and I just did not like hearing my baby back there crying. And there was a point in the crying where there was a part of me that was just like, get yourself together. Like, you work hard. Like, you work hard.
Yeah.
This will work. Like, you have no plan B. And at the end of the day, you work hard. You
manifested it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just made it happen.
Yeah.
You created
And that was the turnaround for me, and just like seeing things in a totally different perspective. Now, you say like, oh, when did you know you made it? I wouldn't necessarily say that like we made it, but I will say we're making the story. We're still creating the story of Frichette's.
I think you made it when you started the interview. For Aaron's Wine Chronicles, live the good life.
You know what? That's what I would say. Aaron,
I'm playing with you, but
you know
still.
what? Cheers to that.
No,
That's
you know what?
You know what?
I'm just playing, obviously.
Well, you know what? I did say that it's an honor being a part of this experience and seeing this come to fruition and being a part of your story with this. So you're right. There you go.
Thank you. But you guys made it a long time before I started this thing. What really impresses me about you, Shae, is the sheer energy and passion that you bring to the winery and to the Northwest wine industry in general. I don't want to sound corny here, but this is the truth. When I first met you, I realized it. I mean, when you walk into a room, you light it up. You have an aura, an energy about you that people like stop and they're like, oh, wow, who's she? What is she doing here? Is she going to come over to our table? But everywhere I go, people know you. And I mention your names in wine circles, and it brings smiles to people's faces. Your energy, it's contagious. And, when you hit Red Mountain, your reputation just kind of started to skyrocket, and it hasn't stopped. And the other thing I really want to mention is that, you and Greg, I've met a ton of winemakers, winery owners, tasting room staff, the whole bit, across the state, across the Northwest, in everywhere from Florida to Virginia to, what I'm saying. I've been around, and you guys are real, genuine people. You make guests, you make your club members feel like family. That, there's no snooty attitudes, there's no agendas, there's no hard sales pitches about the wine. The wine speaks for itself, and you know that. Just two amazing people having fun at what they do. And that, I think, is the perfect segue into talking about all things Frichette Winery. So tell us about the wines of Frichette, and in particular, speak a little bit about the sachet line of wines.
Well, we are a family-owned small, which, that's not really that unique for the state of Washington because, most of our wineries are small and there are a lot of family-owned wineries out there. But we love what we do. We enjoy interacting with our club family, and our club members, they are family. I mean, significant things have happened that we get the opportunity to be a part of. One being, you were newly engaged when I first met you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Cool.
And so getting to be a part of those things, getting to be a part of wedding anniversaries and significant, birthdays and any birthdays. We have club members that have no kids and they come in and now they have kids. We get to be a part of that. So our members are family. So we make mostly Bordeaux varieties. We do focus on reds. I would say, red wines, that's really what our focus is. Under the Frichette portfolio, we're making some fun things like Carmenere, which is one of my favorites to work with.
Oh, yeah.
Zinfandel, we're not doing that anymore. So we are going to be releasing our very last vintage of that. And when I say we're not making anymore, I really mean because they grafted the vine, so there literally is no more.
No, I know.
But, the other things that are just cool to work with, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, Petit Verdot. Yeah. Sachet was one, that label wasn't birthed with Frichette's. That was a newer label for us. So I went to this event called Celebration of Black Women in Wine. I was incredibly inspired and just decided I wanted to create a label that was more of a representation of me. And so I came back to Tri-Cities, and I was just like, Greg, I'm so empowered. I'm so inspired to do something just, that's going to push me and challenge me. And he was just like, well, let me know what I can do to help. How can I support you? What are we doing? And so I just created this sachet label, which has our only Rhone variety, which is Syrah.
Syrah, right. Love it. I love the Syrah. Now, the artwork for the bottles, didn't that come from somebody who was showing their art in the tasting room? Or
Yeah, it's interesting how these things work. There was this young kid named Chance
Yeah,
Watt that
that's
by
right.
chance we were
Yeah.
paired up for an event. Tour de Arts it's an event that happens in the Tri-Cities where they choose businesses and they put an artist in there for the weekend. And he was just randomly paired with us. And once he was clearing his artwork out at the end of the event, he said, "You know what? It'd be really cool to have my work on a bottle." And I was just like, "Well, for Frichette, we kind of are going to stick with what we are doing." And I said, "Wait a minute, but I have this wine I'm making under a brand new label, and I know what I want the bottle to look like. So if I can share it with you, and you can paint what's in my head, you got the job. I'll commission you for that." And he did exactly that. It's
Yeah.
a dope bottle.
Yeah.
It is a
Oh, it
beautiful,
is.
beautiful
It
piece
is.
of artwork.
I've got some in my stash. Yeah, that's really cool. You guys do, you guys do a lot of stuff, like you said, the varietal wines, 100% varietal wines, but also really nice blends. Anything you pair together seems to work out just right. And it's not just me. My brother and his wife are also club members because I brought them in a number of times and they just fell in love with the wines. In particular, my sister-in-law fell in love with the Merlot. She loves your Merlots. If it starts with M, she loves it. And so, it was confirmatory for me that it wasn't just me. I mean, there's a lot of, and whenever I give recommendations, I get recommendations a lot from people coming over from the west side. Hey, we're going to be on Red Mountain, or we're going to be in, the Yakima Valley or whatever. What do you recommend? Frichette is always on that list. It's always on that list.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's, so you're co-owner, you're co-winemaker, you're spouse in this thing and mother in this thing. Describe to me a typical day for you, either doing whatever you do on a normal day or during harvest, which I know is different than a normal day because harvest has a lot of demands. But as co-winemaker, co-owner, wife, and mom, and a mentor at Frichette, what does one of your days look like?
You're right. It kind of depends on what's happening. So harvest is its own beast. During harvest, my focus really is on really just harvest. And so Greg and I are in the production facility a lot. And those days, although they're long, they're some of my favorite because Jaden, our almost 11-year-old, really enjoys being out there because he can work some of the equipment. He knows all the buttons to press. It makes it easier for us because we don't have to hop off the forklift. We can have him speed up the auger or slow it down, speed up the pump, slow it down. He knows how to work all of that equipment. And so those days start really early and they go pretty late. But we really are processing wine grapes, pressing fruit off, getting wine into barrels, kind of the typical things that you would see on a crush pad. We rely a whole lot on our team during harvest because we try and get into the tasting room. So we like for them to explain to our guests, like, they probably will smell like wine and their hands are going to be purple and they might look a little sleepy, but they really want to be in here. Some of the other days, it depends if I'm doing some vineyard work, which is really a passion that I have for being out in the vineyard more. And so those days start early too. So during the summer, I'm doing a lot more being in the vineyard.
When do you get out there?
5 a.m.
Crack of dawn?
Yeah. Well, because we're trying to beat the heat too. So it gets really, really warm here. So 5 a.m. is a really great, easy start time.
You mentioned your team. I tend to frequent a lot of tasting rooms. You know that. And I go a lot of places. I ask a lot of questions of the tasting room staff. If I can get the winemaker cornered, I'll ask that person as much as I can. One thing I notice when I go back and revisit tasting rooms on a periodic basis is the rate of high turnover in staff. What I think is notable to mention about Frichette Winery is the consistency and continuity that I see in your team as it's grown over the years. And I've seen it from the very beginning, like I said. But, I'd like you to kind of tell us about your team, introduce those folks. I mean, I know a lot of them personally, and I really appreciate the work that they do. But a lot of people out there in the audience who are wine lovers or they go to tasting rooms, some people don't appreciate the value of the team.
Yeah.
Can you kind of introduce your team and talk a little bit about them?
Yeah, I think your team is everything. I think for Greg and me, although it'd be great to be in our tasting room every day, there's all kinds of other things that we have to, or I guess we get to be at. vineyard production, other wine events.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the folks that carry our wines, we like to make a presence at their spaces as well.
Right.
We believe in family. We love to be able to get to do things with our son, Jaden. And so our team really keeps the consistency going. So Kathy's our wine club concierge. She's a little bit more behind the scenes, more so on the phone, texting, and making sure our club members are taken care of.
Is that Kathy Nutt?
Kathy Nutt,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
Kathy
yeah.
Nutt. She's awesome. I mean, just hospitality and customer service just runs through her veins. So she's very busy. Whitney is phenomenal. She's such a ball of energy,
I know.
very, very animated,
Yeah.
and just is fueled by people. So she's with us. She's in the tasting room a great deal. Sam on our team, she also works at Yoke. She's the wine steward there. She's there on the weekends. A lot of fun. Fyron was with us before. She transitioned out. She came back. And so that's always fun to see our wine members.
As long as you keep the sword in the sheath so that she doesn't stab one of your customers. I hope Fyron listens to this.
Well, you've got to give the background. So she
I love it.
is
I
an
love it.
actress, and she does stage combat.
Yeah,
And
her and her
so-
husband have this whole thing where they do staged, fighting recreation and
Oh,
stuff like that.
yeah.
It's all like, and they put in a lot of hours. Anyway, it's
do.
just crazy. I love it.
They do.
'Cause,
So she's never having a glass of wine when she's performing, but we may have a glass of wine to watch those
Yeah,
beautiful stage
absolutely.
combat performances. Gail is on our team as well. She's got
Gail is,
many
yes.
years in wine, just many, many, many years.
Yeah,
So
I can't believe that she's kind of like a Hall of Famer you got on your staff right
she
there. I mean,
is
it's like,
a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
We were honored when she chose to come work with
Yeah.
us. We also have some sisters on our team too.
Oh, wow.
Indira
Cool.
and Kay Howe. Have you met them?
I don't know.
No, so they're there on the weekends. I know sometimes you come in. It's
I like to come in like on a Thursday or Friday. Yeah.
So you might miss some of our weekend team members, but we do have a phenomenal team, and they just work really well together.
You do.
And, yeah,
I mean, that says a lot about you and Greg and how
Yeah.
you manage things, right?
yeah,
Anyway, yeah, enough of that about that. But it is something of interest to note because you don't get that at a lot of tasting rooms.
yeah.
So, your winery, Frichette, has a reputation for hosting some really outstanding and unique events, typically focused on, providing great music, delicious food, and of course, paired with your delicious wines. Can you talk a little bit about the event schedule and what's in store for people who want to come and maybe consider becoming a wine club member?
Well, we host events that we want to come to. Like it has to be a phenomenal event that's worth just spending your time at, right? So
Right.
we release our calendar in January for the entire year. And at the top of the year, we're doing things like a sweetheart dinner, getting into the season. We're doing for some of our club members, we're doing some barrel sample tasting
Love
events
barrel
and
samples. Love them.
some new vintage previews where you're trying all the new wines before they're released. We bring a chef over from Seattle, executive chef Sabrina Tinsley. She does a beautiful dinner called Into the Cellar, where we take the group into our cellar, we taste through library wines, and as a group, we pick out the wines that we're going to enjoy with the feast that Sabrina has prepared. And so it's a little different
Do you like her cuisine? Do you like her?
Oh, let me tell you.
Should I have her on this podcast? I'm just
She would
throwing
be
that
phenomenal.
out there. I think
Well,
it would be great.
let me
but-
just say, she's kind of like, I would, in the South, we say, oh, that's so good, you'll slap your mama. Don't have your mama sitting by you when you have Sabrina's food,
Okay.
let's just say.
Okay.
She's phenomenal, but to have that beautiful, intimate experience with her food, soul food dinner, farm to fork. We do our music events, Motown jazz concert, where we bring over Josephine Howell, who's just an iconic vocalist in our states. Actually, she travels too. Jamie Nasario, we have her out for kind of a on the lawn. So we like to do some really cool.
And the saxophonist, right?
Oh yeah, Chazzy Green.
Chazzy Green.
Yeah,
That guy's
from LA.
That guy's crazy.
Yeah,
Love it.
he is crazy but fun.
So those are some really nice events, and you're right. You guys spread them out throughout the year. You have a lot, and you also have other things that you kind of didn't mention. You do some tastings where you'll do some group tastings of wines. Maybe you did mention that. It does include the barrel samples as well. But we sat there in a large group of people, and you give us a piece of paper to kind of do our reviews and kind of try to isolate the flavors and the aromas and stuff. That's really fun to do. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
But what has surprised you the most, or what is the most challenging aspect of owning and operating a winery and a vineyard now that you've been doing it for over a decade, or just about a decade now, on Red Mountain?
I think, when you create this plan, you kind of look at your business as a whole. And for our business, there's just so many pieces. I mean, just so many pieces. Retail that, partners there, vineyard, making the wine in our tasting room, the marketing part, a big component to us is a community part. And so there's just all these spokes, and I think just trying to really manage those things so that we can provide great energy to all of them has probably been what I see as one of the biggest challenges.
It seems to be working though. Whatever you're doing is working. Don't fix something that isn't broke.
Well, at the end of some nights, I like to have a beautiful glass of
Oh,
wine.
absolutely. Yeah. So who has had the most influence on your winemaking and maybe even Greg's? I mean, because you guys are a team, right? I mean, it's not like you guys do this in a bubble. And who do you admire most in the world of wine?
There are a few names. Charlie and Mitch over at Fidelitas Wine Boss, because they took us under their wings. And the thing that they taught us,
Sir Charles Hoppus? Is that who you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And I gotta get him on the podcast. I've been talking to Bryce about it and Will. I need to get him on.
Yeah. Well, he's a grandpa now.
I know.
So
he's kind of semi-retired, right? He's kind of semi-retired.
He thinks he is, but
yeah. I got to try to figure out a way to get him in here.
Yeah, it's hard to just kind of let that, someone with that much knowledge and just such a great mentor.
So did he kind of help get you guys started as far as...
Yeah, he did. So we were introduced actually to Charlie by Dick Boucher. Do you know the name Dick Boucher? So when we came into the business, we were going to grow wine grapes. And Dick Boucher was like, I think you guys should make wine. And we said, we don't know anything about making wine. He goes, let me introduce you to my buddy Charlie. And so I guess because they know each other, Charlie decided he'd meet with us. And he didn't even talk to us really about wine. He just talked to us about family and our values. And then he just says, if you want to learn how to make wine, I'll take you under my wing and I'll show you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did in a way that is extremely non-judgmental and, because there's mistakes that you can make. And so in wine, and because this was an investment for us, there were things that were just like, oh, well, maybe we'll do it this way. And he just coached us through, how to not cut corners and do things the right way. And Mitch on his team was just loving and phenomenal to us as well. And so we just look at them as mentors. They come out every so often. We source from some of the same vineyards that Charlie does. And sometimes Charlie come over to our winery. He's like, your Malbec is still hanging. Why? Why have you picked that yet? So, so he's just been really cool. Yeah. On the hospitality side, though, I got to meet Deb Culverhouse. She used to work in wine. She was working up at Hedges Family Estate, and she really taught me, how you can create memorable experiences for guests in a way that is loving, and you don't have to stress about it, but relating to people on a human level, but still also thinking about how you can provide some element of delight. And so some of the things that I do in hospitality and customer service, I would say I need to attribute to Deb. And then April, you had on your podcast, April Redout.
Right.
April's really, really great when it comes to what your tasting room should look like and how your team can integrate into that. So just kind of watching her from when she was at the Clore Center to working at Costellari, I've learned some things from her too on the tasting room side. Yeah.
She upsets me a lot.
Yeah?
I mean that in a good way. April, I hope you're watching. But I mean, when she was at the Clore Center, I was so happy. I used to go in there all the time, half the time just to talk with her. And then she left. So she upset me when she left. Boom. But then she went to Costellari. Yeah. And I was even happier because I go up there all the time too, right? And I'm like, oh, I get to see April all the time because I go up there every Friday or whatever. And then she left me. Well, now she's doing the RWC thing, which is great, and I'm fully supportive of her. But I'm just,
Well, it sounds like it kind of works out. She had these journey. Yeah. It sounds like it's worked out for you because you get the opportunity to still see her.
And then I was able to interview her too, a few episodes back, which was really fun.
For what she's doing, and I know you had Jen Nance on the podcast
they're kind of doing some kind of similar things there.
But you think about businesses and people that really can influence growth, the bottom line, hospitality in our industry,
efficiency in operations, all those things, right?
That's where they come in. So I think they kind of seem like they're in the back, but I think they can make some tremendous, amazing growth in this industry.
And the thing about people like April and Jen is that they're so well networked, and people know them everywhere, and they respect their insights and their experience. So it doesn't take much for them to be able to help people out, as long as they're open to it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So. You know that I'm married, right?
Remember, I knew you before you were.
That's right. I know the drill, So I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah, I don't want it to be a sensitive question, but it's human. It's human nature. You and Greg, have you ever had a strong disagreement about a particular winemaking decision? And if so, what was it about, and how did you end up agreeing to move forward? I mean, and don't tell me you flipped a coin, because that's just too easy. That's the easy way out.
Well, that's actually a really great strategy, though.
It would be, but I mean, come on. I mean, everybody, sometimes Gabby and I get into an argument about what we're going to have for dinner or breakfast, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's got to happen.
Yeah. Well, you met Greg and I. For the most part,
Yeah.
we're both like pretty even keel, kind of laid back. There's not a whole lot that we sweat. Things like, there's some things where it's just like, well, okay, well, great. We'll go with that. But when it comes to business stuff, we decided early on, like, who's responsible
The roles.
for what.
The roles.
Exactly.
Okay.
The roles. And so you might hear us say things like, stay in your lane.
I haven't heard you guys say that to each
Stay in
other,
your
but
lane. We
but that's
decided that
cool.
early on. So when it comes to, even though we get to work very closely for winemaking, early on, Greg is head of winemaking. So I'll have my opinion on things like our barrel program, or maybe how much of something we should bring in tonnage-wise.
Right.
Greg gets the last say at the end of the day.
Okay.
Absolutely. And when it comes to tasting room, team things, business operations strategy, those are things that I value his opinion and his inputs. But he knows to stay in his lane before I even have to say stay.
You guys seem just too perfect. That's just too damn perfect for me. I was hoping you'd come up with a story about how you threw a plate at him and he had to dodge it and it broke a bunch of wine glasses but that didn't happen. Okay.
No, we're just not those.
That's
I don't
awesome.
think we're those
No, I
kind of
understand,
people. I'm
but
not saying,
that's-
no, we're not perfect by any means. Like, don't get me wrong.
But that's a
we're not
good
perfect,
line.
but-
You've given me some ammo. You've given me some
Yeah.
fodder. Next time I'm in the tasting room, say, hey, Greg,
Stay
in your lane, bro. Stay in your lane. Oh, he's going to be like, who have you been talking to? You've been talking to my wife? I know that you guys are primarily focused on Bordeaux-style varietals. You mentioned that, and blends. But do you guys have any plans to eventually kind of maybe experiment? And you have had experiments in the past, but maybe experiment with other grapes like Tempranillo, Sangiovese, maybe some of the Rhone-style varietals. Do you guys have any plans to maybe delve into that periodically?
No, when we think about, not so much as like for varieties, we'll look at experimenting with how we make our wines. So we think about how can we even get better and more efficient. So we may experiment on that side, but I don't think we'll introduce any new varieties to our portfolio.
Anytime soon, at least.
Anytime
Right?
soon.
Yeah.
Anytime soon.
Okay. So, I know you've been knee deep as one of the leaders on Red Mountain. How do you see Red Mountain growing and evolving over the next maybe 3 to 5 years? Because there's been a lot of rumors, there's been chatter about maybe new tasting rooms being built, or some sort of hotel or some food venue, restaurant that might be built at some point. Do you have any information or on potential developments or additions to Red Mountain that might be coming down the pike that you can share with us?
I'm excited about. I'll go from like what everybody would know is just every corner and crevasse of Red Mountain that can be planted. You're seeing new plantings going in, so that's exciting to me. I'm excited for the summit on Red Mountain, which is this gorgeous venue. It's a beautiful floor-to-ceiling window house that you could do events at.
So where's it going to be located?
It's across from Avinia.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
It's gorgeous. And so things like that, when you're thinking about like your dream experience on Red Mountain with the wineries, like you want to have accommodations out there. So
it's going to be a place where you can stay overnight.
Oh yeah. You can stay overnight. You can have small events there.
And will they have food offerings, you think?
They'll be working with like amazing chefs and food. Oh yeah. So I'm excited about things like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think there will be other tasting rooms that are open. I mean, like I just think about the 10 years that we've been there and some of the new tasting rooms that have opened. I think partnering with Benton City to, offer some of those, boutique restaurants and, folks want to see a hotel, like something that's really close to the mountain would be.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really cool. I'm excited about the little farm stand that's there. That's right across from us. So and there's a lot more foot traffic than there was when we first opened. So it's, it's kind of one of those things where, I mean, you come out there, like, don't you enjoy like having the opportunity to get to know team members and the winemakers? So it's kind of that balance on, how do you still grow and have these amazing amenities, but how do you still feel like a really cool small wine region?
Yeah.
So I think we're figuring out that balance.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get that. If you go to Napa, Jen and I talked about this on our interview. You don't get the intimate discussions with people who are actually making things happen when you go to the wineries in the bigger areas. You just don't get it. I mean, they're not there.
Yeah. And I don't want to lose that on.
That's
on
what makes it special on Red Mountain.
Yeah.
So, are you involved in any professional type wine organizations? If so, can you kind of talk a little bit about your involvement in or other types of business related organizations?
Yeah, so I'm still involved with the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. So they advocate for small business, which when you think about like the wineries in the area and infrastructure that we're needing and policy, so they advocate for business. The African American Vintners Association, we get to be a member of that. Association of Washington Business. So organizations that are Red Mountain AVA Alliance, we're a member of that organization. And so what I tend to look at is how can we support from a membership standpoint, or if there are volunteer opportunities that will help with the growth and success of our industry. And of course, like there are a lot of other informal sort of things. So we grow food for the Benton City Food Bank.
Yeah.
We get together as tasting room people to share best practices. We have like little, other little small, grower winemaker groups where you just kind of share best practices and kind of figure out what types of things you can do to elevate what we're doing as a wine community.
One of the things that I was wondering about when I asked you one of the previous questions was about in any formalized training that you've had in wine. Most of it's been on the job. You said, you and Greg learned from Charlie and other people on Red Mountain, but do you have any formalized, wine training that you're going through?
Well, I did some of the, not so much like how to make wine kind of training, but I did WSETs level 2, and then the intro to Court of Master Sommelier. So that was a really fun opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm always doing some sort of educational something, whether it's online something or going to classes just to learn. And then right now I'm in a viticulture program.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am a lifelong learner though. And I just kind of need to feel like I'm developing and growing.
You don't want to stagnate. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you meet a ton of people all the time in your job. People come in from all over the world into these wineries, right? And you're there a lot of times, I know, because I'm there. What is something people would be surprised to know about Shae Frichette that they wouldn't normally know about you?
Geez, like the way you even pose that question sounds like there's some dark secret I'm about to reveal, which let me just say, I'm not. So I used to compete jumping double Dutch.
Double Dutch.
Yes, which is where I actually got to meet Oprah Winfrey. So I think
you actually met Oprah.
I did, yeah. This was back during the cross color days. Did you ever dress cross color? Or like you have one red sock and like one purple sock?
No, I was before that time.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, so it was back in those days. But double Dutch was just, it's just and when you would drive into. They used to have this when you would drive into the town of Marion, South Carolina, from any entrance into the town. It would say home of the Double Dutch World Champions.
You were a world champion.
Yeah.
Did they give you like a trophy or a medal? Or,
oh, yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
That is really awesome. Because I've seen some of that. I mean, periodically, you'll see something like on ESPN or on something, one of those channels where they're talking about off-type sports. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because double Dutch is definitely it's a skill,
sport.
but it's not hockey or baseball or whatever, right? But I mean, and when you're watching it, you're like, man, they make it look easy, but it's all syncopation and rhythm and timing and oh man, that's crazy.
I tried to find that clip. ESPN actually, I didn't even know what ESPN was, but I was interviewed by ESPN.
Really?
Yeah, like years ago. This is before the
that is so
internet.
Cool. I'm gonna go do some research online after the interview.
I tried to find it.
Yeah.
And so and and I wasn't successful in finding it. But
So my mom, who's, my I have two daughters, and they, when they were young, going in, middle school and high school, she would go out and they would grab, the ropes, and they would try to do the double Dutch stuff. She would get them just moving to be active,
Oh, yeah,
And I would be standing there watching them, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And, but then, to go from just playing around in the backyard to being a world champion.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
It was spectacular.
So do you have,
really cool.
do you think that if you were to just get back out there and just try some stuff, would you still have the moves? Would you still be able to have the balance and the dexterity to?
Oh yeah, I can jump double Dutch. I can't do like I used to do like flips in the rope. I used to do. They had what was called doubles, where you have two people on the rope, and so my partner would just throw me over her shoulder, and we do all kinds of stuff. So I don't think I'm quite ready to do that, but
that's crazy.
A few years ago. One of my former coworkers wanted me to teach his kids how to jump, and in 30 minutes, I taught them how to do a cartwheel into the rope and how to jump. And I had to be able to demonstrate that. So
I guarantee you couldn't teach me how to do that. I guarantee it.
How about we?
I can't even do a cartwheel. I would take out the rope and both people on each end and everything else.
I'd sit with a glass of wine to watch that. I would love to watch that.
It would be funny. So, if you didn't co-own and co-make wine at Frichette with your husband, what would you be doing?
Well, Aaron, there's still other things that I like to do. Mm-hmm. So I want to open a little ice cream shop in Benton City, and I actually purchased a parcel down there because that's one of the things that I'd like to do.
Do you want to make your own ice cream, or do you want to distribute?
Make my own ice cream and sell it in a little ice cream shop for a couple of reasons. First off, I love ice cream. And I also want to create a business that can contribute to the economic development of a small town like that. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that if I wasn't, making wine and running a winery, I'd already be doing that. So I think really that's probably the biggest thing. And I'll have like a boozy ice cream, for the adults.
Well, if you make maple nut ice cream, my wife will be your best customer.
Oh.
Maple nut ice cream.
That's her. Okay.
Unbelievable.
Okay. Duly noted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm really excited, for the future of Frichette and Red Mountain, because I'm always out there. I'm always visiting. It was great to be able to host you today, Shae. And before we go, I'd like you to take a little bit of time and remind your audience about the winery and what makes it so special.
We want people to feel like they belong. And so when you walk into our doors, you're greeted within 3 seconds. Our vibe is cool. Our space is neat. We have a really cool patio where you sit right next to the vines. And so we want to be your destination that you come to and you just feel like you belong. Yeah. And so doing that with incredible wines, wines that we handcraft. I think you can feel the love when you taste our wines.
Absolutely.
It's just how we want people to remember us.
Well, Aaron's Wine Chronicles highly recommends a visit to Frichette Winery on Red Mountain in Benton City, and more than one visit, because once you go there, they're going to pull you in. Shae, I want to thank you again for joining us on Live the Good Life, and that's all we have for today's episode. Again, for more of Living the Good Life, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Aaron's Wine Chronicles, or online at aaronswinechronicles.com. And for a video podcast version of this episode, visit my YouTube channel at the @ Aaron's Wine Chronicles 6666. Thank you all for listening. And remember, wherever you go, whenever you can, always live the good life. Until next time.